guys for coming out, and thank you for the introduction. I am one of the worst people in the world now. As of last week, the people over me. It's a rather large group of people that he has named to this list, and so I try not to let it go to my head. It seems every night it's either Bill O'Reilly or whoever's written about people in that day. So it was a bit of a surprise, though, being at the beach to find my mother watching it with me and seeing that on television. So it was a little interesting. But I'll get to why I was one of the worst people in a few minutes, but I want to talk briefly about why cable news matters in the first place, because I sometimes talk to people who don't understand why I should even bother writing about cable news, watching it for that matter, or talking about the audience for it. You know, you can dismiss it by saying all the viewers are 75 and sitting at home all day watching Fox, or you can dismiss it by saying that all the audience is just Washington insiders who are watching MSNBC, and they all already have the same point of view. There are a lot of different reasons why people try to dismiss cable, I think, whether ideological or financial or otherwise. But the bottom line is that it drives the news cycle, and that the audience is really rather large and limited over time. And that's why I started blogging on TV Newser in 2004. I was a freshman in college, and I wanted to be on cable news. I wanted to be one of the anchors. I hadn't yet realized that I was already balding and that they weren't going to take me out of college. And even if I got there, it would take 20 years to get there, even with the hair transplants. So I was writing about CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. And I was writing about them because Peter Jennings would come on at night and say something like, as viewers watched on cable news this afternoon. And then I realized he was only covering that because he had it all day in the office. He was only covering that because he felt like he had to. Because cable news was driving the news cycle. And it wasn't getting any respect. It wasn't getting any attention. You know, the New York Times would write about CNN or Fox News once a month. And even then, they would write about it as if it was inferior to the evening newscasts or the Today Show, even though their audience over time is similar. So I created this blog, not really realizing how many viewers are out there for cable news, and not really realizing how many people would read a blog about it. I later came to realize that about 75 million people a month watch CNN, that about 60 million a month watch Fox News, 55 million a month watch MSNBC. These are massive audiences over time to check in with these channels, even if only 1 million or 3 million are watching at any given time. So it really does drive the conversation in a way that no other medium does, with the possible exception of the internet now, especially now more than in 2004. Still, even with the internet, cable news has really permeated into the landscape as this mechanism for driving the debate, both in DC and around the country, oftentimes in negative ways, sometimes in positive ways. So I guess I would start by explaining a couple of basics, so I don't have to say them later. This is the paragraph in my story where I just get it all out of the way, so no one's pissed off. Fox News is number one, it always has been number one, as long as I can remember, since 2002. Its ratings are always higher than anybody else. So I have to say that right off the get-go, because Fox supporters will say, well, you're minimizing how huge and powerful Fox is. Then right off the gate, you have to say that there is polarization on cable news, that they're not all created equal. You have to create a sliding scale of ideology with Fox on one side, MSNBC on the other, and CNN is somewhere in between, maybe in the middle, maybe not, but somewhere on that scale. And never has it been as clear and as stark as it is now, and so I'll get back to that in a little while. But I think the most important thing to talk about tonight is the corporate pressure and the corporate influence that these channels feel in a variety of ways, and in ways that are not normally very apparent. When I talk about corporate influence and corporate pressure, it can mean a lot of things, and it can be positive, and it can be negative. And from my perch at the Times, I'm not supposed to be declaring one way or the other. But we can look at it and make judgments about whether this is normal, whether this is appropriate or not. I guess it shouldn't shock us that executives, let's say General Electric, which owns MSNBC, or News Corporation, which owns MSNBC, or Time Warner, which owns CNN, it shouldn't shock us that those executives are keenly aware of what's going on their channels. They may say they don't care, but they are keenly aware of what's being broadcast. After all, it's on their office all day. It is the ID drip for the news channels and of many major companies. We should point out that GE also owns CNBC, which covers GE directly all the time. We should also keep in mind that these executives have not gotten to where they are because they're hands-off. Roger Ailes has not gotten to where he is because he stays above the fray. These executives are successful in part because they are involved and because they do shape the editorial processes. And as I said, corporate influence isn't always bad, and I don't know, to be honest, how to feel about the deal that I heard about between Fox and MSNBC, but I'll take you through it briefly about how I reported it and what I think it means. I got a tip in June from a person at Fox that said that they've been told to be fair to GE. Be fair to GE. I was fascinated by this language because the implication there was that you weren't being fair to GE before, and that you should be fair to GE now for some unknown reason. And they were cloaking this decision in the slogan of Fox News, which is fair and balanced. They were making this editorial decision to be fair as if they hadn't been fair before. I spent a long time trying to figure out if there actually was a deal between GE and News Corp, and a lot of the employees I asked had no idea. But I watched television for the next 2 months and saw that the simple math was proving it out to be the case. All of a sudden, Keith Olbermann on MSNBC was not attacking Fox News anymore. All of a sudden, Bill O'Reilly was not going after GE anymore. The story almost proved itself just by watching every night on cable news and noticing that the attacks went down almost to zero. Not quite, but almost to zero. Whether the executives and the anchors say there was a deal or not, there was a detente, there was a truce just visible to viewers. It was obvious. Whether how